Hey playa, it could be hard sometimes making new friends, and what could make it even harder is as if you're trying to make friends with the opposite sex. For me growing up, it wasn't always easy to make friends with girls. I found it incredibly easy to be friends with guys, but with girls, that was a bit of a challenge. So today I want to share a little bit of my experience, some of the female friends I made over the years, and how I went about doing that.
This is the Just Beats, you're watching the Just Beef.
First, I want to take you back to my elementary school days. Now you might be thinking, okay, you were a little kid then, it was probably a lot easier for you to just interact with all the other little kids, but that wasn't exactly true. I noticed early on that there was a difference between how the boys played and how the girls played, and generally they kind of stuck with their own groups. So the idea of talking to the girls seemed so foreign to me. It's like the boys would pick on the girls and make fun of them, and that's just what boys did. I don't even remember if I shared this story with you guys before, but one time there was a girl running around playing tag with everyone, and she ended up ripping her dress. So from there, she sat down on the ground and started crying while all the boys formed a circle around her and started pointing at her and laughing. Well, I was one of those boys because all the other boys were doing it too. So as you can see, I was pulled into this girls versus boys dynamic that took place in elementary school. That wasn't until I met one girl who also really liked Goosebumps like I did. When I saw her reading it one day, I walked up to her and said, "Awesome, you like Goosebumps too? What's your favorite book?" And the two of us just started talking about Goosebumps and what we really liked about it. And what was cool about that is that Goosebumps was something so universal at the time. So it was easy to talk to people about it because it was such a commonplace thing for people to be reading Goosebump books. The two of us ended up becoming friends over books, which was very different from the type of relationship I had with another girl in my school. This other girl was just as competitive as me. Whenever it came to doing any kind of extra credit assignments, special projects, or anything you can get an award, both of us would compete for it. And at first, I hated her. She was my competition. But as the two of us always ended up showing up in the same spot, doing the same thing, we started to grow a mutual respect for one another and actually became friends. So the lesson I learned is that friendship can arise from playfulness with each other. If there's a girl in your class that you want to compete with or you want to tease about doing better on a certain assignment, go for it because a friendship can actually develop. Now moving on to middle school, things were a little different. I was starting to look at girls in a different kind of way. And because of that, I felt like it was impossible to be friends with any of them. I was afraid people would think I automatically liked them if I talked to them. I didn't know what I would actually talk to them about. I felt like we were worlds apart. So it just became a little bit difficult to actually approach girls and talk to them as friends in middle school. That wasn't the case with every girl though. There were two girls that were best friends that were in a lot of my classes, and every time we found out that we were in each other's classes, we'd pretend like it was the worst thing in the world, and that became our running joke. We would go in on each other. I'd tell these girls things like, "Oh God, I'm gonna vomit if you're in another one of my classes." And they would say things back, trying to go a little bit harsher than I did, but no one really got offended because we understood the grounds in which we were saying it. Our friendship was a pretty unique one. If anyone had asked me if I was actually friends with these girls, I would have probably said no. But I did get a little excited every time I found out that they were in one of my classes because I had someone on the female side to interact with. And in middle school, when it came to actually hanging out with girls, that never really went anywhere. In fact, the only time I ever really hung out with girls was when my friends had female friends that they hung out with and I was just kind of there. Somehow, two of my close friends were friends with some of the popular guys. And of course, popular guys generally brings around popular girls. So sometimes when I'd be hanging out with them, these girls would come around and they'd interact with me like I was part of that group. I felt like I was special in some kind of way. For a while, I was an honorary popular kid, and these girls would interact with me like I was one of their friends. But whenever I wasn't with that group or wasn't around my friends, they would kind of just walk by me in the halls and I would never look at them because that would be too much. Looking back on it though, the only thing that actually held me back from developing friendships with these popular girls was myself. Had I not overthought things, had I actually just approached them and talked to them, they probably would have been friends with me, just like they acted friendly when I was hanging out in the popular group. But for me, it's a lesson learned, and hopefully it's a lesson learned for you if you're in a type of situation where you're afraid to approach someone just because they're popular. Moving on to high school, my perception of having female friends kind of took a backseat to me really wanting to have a girlfriend. Now this led to my very first interaction with a girl in high school. Now I've talked about this story in the past and I've done it in a video. But to sum it all up, basically, this girl had approached me to start talking because we both had the same class together. With her approaching me, I felt like it was so much easier to develop a friendship with her. Not only do we have the same class, but we both had things we can connect over. She was asking me about my hobbies, my interests, and then from there we just kind of talked about things that we generally like. Being on that receiving end and having someone else carry that conversation for me made it so much easier to develop that friendship, which is exactly what I'm always telling you guys to do. Approach your crushes, approach girls, make friends, start that conversation and show them that you're going to carry it so that they can feel a little bit more at ease. And when it came to developing a friend group that consisted of girls in high school, my brother at the time had a girlfriend and she had tons of female friends. So every time I'd hang out with him and he'd be with her, she would bring us over and introduce me to her friends. From there, I started talking to each of these girls and started developing my own personal connection with each one, which helped solidify me more in their group. I could have easily just stood in the background and said hi and spoke to everyone as if they were one collective audience. But by individually talking to each person, they felt like, hey, he's someone that each of us can get along with, and therefore he's all right to keep around. Now, some of you may not have siblings that are in the same school as you, but if you have friends that are in relationships, chances are their girlfriend has their own group of friends. And that's the perfect way to start developing any kind of connections with other girls. Now let's move on to college. I'm out there on my own, living on the campus. So any friendships I develop with girls, I'm in full control over. Since I was taking a lot of different marketing classes, there were tons of times where I had to work on group projects with people. And of course, any group project usually involves a bunch of random kids in the class, some of them being girls. For one of my projects, there were 3 girls in one group and 1 guy. And of course, that guy ended up being that slacker who doesn't do any work in a group project, if you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, as we worked on the project, I told myself I was going to try to develop a friendship with these girls beyond the class, because I felt like usually when you work on a group project with someone, once it kind of comes to an end, you don't really talk to them anymore, and I didn't want that to happen. All of us, minus the guy who didn't do any work, would meet up every so often throughout the week to get dinner and to study, or get dinner and work on the projects. Sometimes we meet up for lunch, but it was cool that we were starting to make it part of our regular routine to spend time with each other outside of class. Had we only talked to each other through text and email, it would have been way easier to ignore any possibility of a friendship because we didn't have that in-person interaction outside of class. But even when we finished the group project, I would still encourage my group to meet up so we can study and just hang out, and everyone seemed on board with that, except for the kid who didn't do any work. So the real test there is, once the class finished at the end of the semester, did we remain friends? Well, 2 of the girls started to drift off a little bit, but one of the girls actually stayed my friend. The 2 of us would meet up for lunch every so often, and she started bringing around one of her other friends, which I ended up becoming friends with too. So somehow through that class, I developed 2 new friends that were girls in college. Now I know there's going to be times where you're going to have to work on group projects, or you're going to share a lot of different classes with one girl. So in those cases, those are the times I think you should act on them. Talk to that person, interact with them, and try to take that connection outside of school so you can solidify it like I did. There was also another girl in college that I had never actually hung out with before, but both of us developed a friendship simply because we had a mutual friend in common. I had briefly met this girl at my friend's prom. This was the second prom I had ever went to. I did a video on this in the past, and this was the one where I went with a girl that I had never even met before. But anyway, there was very little connectivity between me and this random girl who I had briefly met at a prom, now going to my college. When I spoke to our mutual friend and found out that her friend was going to the same college as me, I used that as an opportunity to springboard into developing a friendship with her. I remember shooting her a message online, introducing myself, and talking about the school. Since I was a year older, I had a little bit more experience as to how the school functioned, where to go get food, and all those little things you learn in your kind of first year of college. She was super excited about having more friends in the school, so me and my brother decided to go to her dorm room to hang out one night, to get to know her better, and to really develop that friendship in college. From that experience, I feel like the takeaway was to simply utilize the mutual connections I had with people. If I had a friend that knew someone else in my college, I would use that as the conversation starter just to warm it up so that we can develop our own type of connection. Normally, I probably never would have talked to this girl on my own, but the simple fact that we both knew someone in common made it easier for us to develop a friendship. What do you think though? Do you find it difficult to develop friendships with people of the opposite sex? Leave your comments below and we'll talk about it. Each of these circumstances were completely different, But the one common thread that pulled them all together was the simple fact that I made use of what I had. Whether it was through mutual friends, someone I had a class with, or someone I just met randomly that I developed my own playful relationship with, each and every single time I tried to be as proactive as I could be, which is exactly what you can do too. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button below. I put out new videos every Tuesday and Fridays sharing tips and ideas teaching you how to be your best self. I want to hear your guys' stories. Talk to me. Talk to me about the type of friendships you want to develop. Talk to me about the type of friendships you already have. Let's share our experiences down in the comment section below together. As always, guys, love and peace.